There you are now. Welcome back to the workshop. Today is tomorrow and it's now time to put that engine in. So we decided we'd go along and show you the engine going back in because I know you always like to hear one of these engines go back in and start up, and it kind of will finish up and round out this project the way it is. It wouldn't be one of my videos if I didn't show you some tips. Well, today is a tip that we're going to learn and see whether it is a tip or not. So by the end of the video you'll know if it is, and if not, it's just another way of doing it. So one of the big problems with these S engines, and I'm going to talk a little bit about S engines now in a second, is that they have Hardy-Spicer outputs, which are these sort of U-joints here. They're Hardy-Spicer outputs, and they have 4 bolts that hold them into place around the flange. Now, the way this works is that the stud sticks out of the flange out towards the Hardy, and the Hardy would normally be on the end of the drive shaft. For all intents and purposes, when you put this into the car, you have very little room between the subframe, the gearbox, and the other side of the Hardy to actually get the nuts on, get them tight, and be confident with them. We've wrestled with this the last few times that we've been putting these engines in and out, and myself and the customer who owns this car were debating this the other day in the shop, and we came up with the idea that it may well be better to actually have the Hardys bolted on first onto the output shafts of the gearbox and loosen off the ball joints here on the ends of the car. Loosen off the top ball joint and just let the hub lie over, which will pull out the drive shaft. That means when we drop the engine in, then we can just push the hub back into place, line it up with the splines and the Hardy, and it may well be a much easier way, meaning that we can have the Hardys on already. That would also be a much easier way to take the engines out in a race situation. If we have to change an engine out because of a fault or a problem, we would know to just drop off the 2 hubs, drop off the gear linkage, and we'd be able to lift the engine out without all this time spent. We could get another set of Hardys for the spare engine, put them onto the spare engine, and it just might reduce our time. It might also be something that helps you guys in the future. If you've got Hardy outputs, you might well find that this is a quicker way to lift an engine. We'll see. By the end of the video, we'll know whether it's the case or not. S engine. So in the comments recently, there has been some debate about whether this is an S engine or not. I have answered some people individually, but as a whole, just to kind of cover this. These are FIA racing cars. They race in the spirit of FIA and Cooper S. It was a decision made by some groups of motorsport authorities that in certain categories it would be allowed that we not run actual Cooper S engines. Cooper S's stopped production in the 60s. Yeah, 60s. S engines haven't been built since then. When we think about that, that means we have had, you know, a huge period of time where the quantity of S engines are reducing and reducing and reducing. Either they've gone to scrap, the engines have been damaged in race series around the world over the years, or you know, they've been lost to the annals of time. The few S engines that exist now in the world need to be preserved. They need to be kept and they need to be protected so that we will have S engines going forward to keep the mark alive. We have made the decision that we won't run the S engine from this car as the race engine. We'll run one of these A series motors. It looks, for all intents and purposes, if you looked in underneath the bonnet, like an S motor, but without the tappet chest covers and without some physical differences. But for all intents and purposes, if you looked at this engine from the front in the car, you could think it was an S motor, or it would look very, very similar to an S motor. And that's the reason why. It's not that we don't have the S motor, it's just simply that we're trying to preserve them and protect them. And that's the idea behind it. So, for those of you that I know have been confused, is it an S engine or not an S engine? Technically speaking, no, these are not S engines, but they're built in the spirit of an S engine. Okay, so I'm going to drop this into the car. I'm going to spare you the faffing around with dropping one of these in. You've seen me do this a few times before. And then we'll get to connecting up these drive shafts and see how good the drive shafts actually, this idea is. Does it make it easier or does it not? Okay. Okay, so you can see I've taken off the bottom ball joint and the top ball joint and the steering arm so that I have the drive shaft kind of free in my hand.
So it's just a matter of lining it up in here with the, I say just a matter of lining it up. You just got to get this lined up with the Hardy Spicer, and then once you get the splines lined up, there we go, it'll go in. So then just a case of getting that up into that top ball joint there, getting a nut to hold it. That of course is the wrong one. Get a nut to hold that, and then connect up the bottom ball joint and the steering arm. Okay, so I think that is a little bit easier than putting the CV joints together, but obviously, you know, in the race car it's easy because all of these joints come apart pretty easy. On a road car that may not be the same, but I still think it's probably a little bit easier and you have a little bit more control because you're out here from the outside. Okay, next thing to do is to connect up the gear linkage and the exhaust. Okay, get this gear linkage into place, which is 4 bolts, and then the exhaust, which you've seen before, just a case of loosening off at the back. You want to loosen off the clamps so that the exhaust system can kind of slide reasonably free in the clamps to move backwards and forwards. And then just a case of lining them. I have the exhaust manifold loose up on the cylinder head still, so it's there is some movement. It's all very tight with the drive shafts and the remote gear housing. We did a little modification to the exhaust manifold as well. We changed the angle at the cylinder head just very slightly, because before we were getting a little bit of rubbing between the Hardy Spicer and the exhaust on this particular manifold, and we think at some stage maybe going over a curb or something like that, while the exhaust was red hot, it probably maybe damaged it just slightly, or well, bent it towards the Hardy Spicer. So it rubbed, and it actually almost rubbed a hole through the Hardy. I'll show you in a while. I have the piece of metal I cut out of the pipe to weld in a new piece to replace it. So I'll show you that now in a couple of minutes, and you can see. So once we kind of get the exhaust on and buttoned up, and we get this gear linkage on and buttoned up, we're able to drop the car down. I do think that putting on the drive shafts through the Hardys is actually easier, because there just is no room up here for trying to get those bolts in, and to be confident that the bolts are in and tight. When I did it with the engine out, I was able to be really confident that I got those Hardy Spicer bolts really good and tight and nipped up. Once we have these done, we'll move up towards the top of the engine bay, and I'm going to show you that lifting hook, because I know you are very interested in seeing that. So I'll do that next. So this engine lifting eye has had a lot of questions and remarks over the last few videos. So I'm going to give you a look at it and give you as much information about it as I can. So looking at it here from side profile, it's a piece of angled steel, and I'll give you a better look at that now in a minute. It's a piece of angled steel. I think it is 5mm. Yeah, it's 5mm angled steel. These are 2 pieces of round bar, and I've drilled a hole down through them in the lathe to put this other piece of round bar. To tell you what that is, that's old exhaust. No, it's a steering clamp is what it is. Steering rack clamp off a Mini. And I've just put a little bit of a bend in it and put it down there. I've TIG welded it around the top. So what makes this so unique, or makes it so useful for me, is 2 things. One, the angle it makes. Okay, so the angle it makes is damn near 45 degrees out of the 90. So the angle iron has 90 degrees, and it bisects the 90 through the center. So, you know, damn near 40, it comes out at 45 degrees, the middle of the angle. So if I take it off and show you, you can see it's pretty much coming out at near enough. So I'll give you the measurements. From this side of the angle iron, it's 20mm, and from this side of the angle iron, it's 15mm. Okay, so it's 15 there, and it's, if we measure it there, it's 20mm there. The angle iron is, I'd say it's 40. Yeah, it's 40 by 40 angled steel. And the width of those eyes, it's not crucial, but it just, you need to have enough room to be able to get the head stud in the middle. So the width of those eyes is 850 millimeters.
all right? No, 85 millimeters, what am I talking? Not 850 millimeters, 85 millimeters, yeah? So it's 85 across there. The length of the arms that come out of the angle iron are 130 millimeters. Each one of those is 130. And then the hook sort of finishes up about 30 past that. It's about another 30 past that. They are, you can see this has been well used. It's got a few bends to it now and a couple of angles to it, but I countersunk the holes on this side. And the reason for countersinking the holes on that side is so they fit down over the head stud. Why do you want it to fit down over the head stud? Because you want to get the most amount of tread you can on the head stud nut. Now, some head studs this doesn't work with because basically they don't protrude enough. There isn't enough protrusion here on the head studs. In this engine you can see the center head stud is low, but the two outer head studs here are higher. Now the reason why that center head stud is sunk down more is because that's the dowel head stud. That actually is the one that centralizes the cylinder head. And I use a slightly different head stud for that, and it's just slightly shorter. You can, however, still use this lifting hook by just taking out those nuts completely and actually just bolting this straight down using the cylinder head nuts. And that's how I actually originally designed it. But just later in the years, just to save me retorquing cylinder heads and stuff, I just leave those two outer studs longer, and it means that I can just bolt straight on there. Where it finishes, so when this is bolted down, where it finishes is dead in line with the outside of the rocker cover. So you can see, if I put my ruler down along the rocker cover, you'll see the center of the lifting hook is in line with the ruler, and that's what you're looking for. If you can lift your mini engine in the middle of the rocker cover, so now it's not the center of the head stud, don't get that wrong, it's not the center of the head stud. So if you come around this side, Billy, and just show them the middle here, you can see where the center of the head stud is, and you can see that the center of the lifting hook is offset from that. That's also a really important measurement. You don't want to be lifting off the middle of the cylinder head, you want to be lifting over to this side. So the center of it is probably, looking at that there now, it's probably about 15 mil off the center of the head stud to the gearbox side. And the reason why you want that is because you have to offset the weight of the clutch and flywheel. Okay, so you have to offset to get the engine to lift up squarely out of the body. Otherwise, if you lift off the head stud, what will happen is the engine will always lean over on the clutch side. It'll always lean over on the walk side. But if you can come over that 15 millimeters more towards the middle there to that side, it just is enough to counterbalance it. How did I get that to work out? It's just trial and error over the years. I'll give you the measurements from center to center. Okay, so if I go from the center of that pin to the center of the head stud bolt, it's exactly 30 millimeters. Okay, so the center of that pin to the center of the head stud bolt, 30 millimeters. The same, let's go over to this one. So the center of that one to the center of that pin is 45 millimeters. Okay, 45 there. And you can see, if you look straight down on it, you'll see the offset of that cylinder head stud. You can see how much offset it is compared to where the lifting hook is. Yeah? See that offset? That offset, as I said, is really important if you want the engine to lift out square. I've been doing a bit of thinking about this, and if people want, I could do a run of these on my web shop. It'll take me a bit to get tooled up to make a few of these. So answer me in the comments below, would you like me to make you a few of these? If you do, what I can do is I can set up a pre-order on my website, and when we get to say something like 5 or 10, we'll figure it out. I'll have to do the logistics on it to see what will work. But because I'll have to buy a length of this steel. I won't get this steel in offcuts. I'll have to buy a full 22-foot length of it. So I'll probably get like 10 or 20 of them out of it. So just to offset the costs for me, I could do a pre-order and we could make maybe 20 of these, or whatever the pre-order comes to. We'll set a limit on the pre-order. In the comments below, if you'd like me to do a run of these kind of engine lifting hooks, then stick them in the comments below. And if we get enough interest, I'll put a pre-order on the website and we can make it happen over the next month or two, and we could get a run of these made. Let me know. I don't mind if you want to go make them yourselves, go for it. Absolutely, I'll be all about it. I've given you all the measurements that I can. If people need other measurements or angles, let me know and I'll do those. Or vice versa, if you want me to do, if there's enough interest, I know not everyone has welders and lathes to be drilling holes and doing all that stuff, then I will do a pre-order of them, and you know, when we get to a number that's sufficient to buy the stock material, then I'll do a run of them. And I might even make a video on making them, if that's something you want to do. All right, let's get back to the engine. So I've added some more componentry off camera. You've seen me doing this, right? I put the oil cooler back on, you've seen it in the last video. I put the alternator back into place. I put the temperature sender back in. I have the clutch slave cylinder back on. I have the distributor in place and set timing for cylinder number 1. Oil cooler's back on and connected up. The coil pack is back on and connected up. So really all we have to do before we can get this motor fired up now is to get the carburetors on and the exhaust buttoned up here towards the cylinder head. So I think we'll do that next. So the most important part of getting these carburetors into place is making sure that we get them onto the dowels, which can be a little bit tricky. It's just, oh look at that, hooked around there. Okay, so they like to foul on pretty much everything in the engine bay. But if we can just get that one in there. There's one and there's the other. Now we've made some custom washers for this because there's a discrepancy between the thickness of the inlet manifold and the thickness of the carburetor. So what we've done here is we've taken a big flat washer and we've welded half another flat washer onto the edge of it there, and then just nicked across it with the grinder so that we have the right amount of discrepancy for the inlet manifold and the exhaust. Well, it's actually the inlet manifold and the exhaust this way. So they'll go around, they'll sit in there, they'll clamp the inlet and the exhaust evenly. It's something you always need to watch out for on this because it's running the super duper high flow race exhaust. The flange that they're made out of is a really thick piece of steel, and the old original Cooper S inlet manifold which we're using in those days, they have a fairly thin flange on them. You can build up aluminium weld on the back of them. That's another way of getting around it, but in this case you've just so little room between the master cylinder and the float bowl to try and get the whole arrangement in, that even just that couple of mil built up can actually make it really awkward to get in it. So for me, the best solution that I've found is just using these washers. They take up the clearance and it'll give it the space. Now these are always really awkward to get in, and the fact that they have a step on them doesn't help at all. You have to make sure that step sits in the right spot so that you don't you know, if it's on the exhaust side, it's not going to work at all. So they have to sit on the inlet side. You just got to get it in the right spot. So those ones are the easy ones. Getting these ones in here behind the inlet, you need long fingers. Something I'm lucky to be blessed with. And good manual dexterity. Lots of trying not to drop it. So I'll just do it on camera just to prove. There we go. All 4 in place. Didn't drop one. Probably drop all the nuts now trying to put them on. Jinxed myself. Okay, so once we get these cinched down, then it's a matter of getting the plugs in, get the plugs connected up, and we have oil pressure up. We've seen that, we did it on the camera. We got oil pressure up on the starter motor, so we know we have our oil pressure up. So really the only other thing to do then is to connect up the throttle cable, put the distributor cap on and the leads, and fill it with oil. It probably needs a small drop of oil just to top it up, and then we can crank it over and see if it'll fire. Okay, so I've primed the carbs. They're fitted on now. I have the fuel line on. Primed the carbs. I primed the oil system again just with the oil pressurizer. I've topped up the oil. We're up to top. We've checked our water. Our water is good, and we've checked our ignition timing. We're very near on the money with the ignition timing. I'm going to just add a little bit of livation here to the inlets because these are HS4s. They don't have any choke system. We get rid of the choke system on these racers because it doesn't tend to function very well, and it can cause the car to suddenly go rich. So we'll just try a little crank over now and see, do we get any life out of her? turn on our fuel pump, turn on our ignition, check to make sure we're not in gear. Okay, I think she wants a little twerk on the timing. Let's try a bit of timing. Well, we want a bit of timing the other way. Okay. Another little bit. We're close now. Okay, we give it just another small bit of ignition. So that's just leanness now is the only reason why that doesn't want to just fire straight up. Because like I said before, we don't have an option for choke. I'm giving her a little bit of libation. Okay, a little bit too much ignition now. We're close, we're close. So it's all fuel now. Just want to get her warm. So these needles are more than likely a little bit lean because this engine has gone up a cam. So I think these needles are a little bit lean. Okay, we'll try a slightly richer needle and we'll come back to you. Okay, I've adjusted the carburetors. I've enriched the needle. I'm waiting on richer needles to come for this engine, but I've enriched the needles that are on it, and I'd say we'll be fairly close. It definitely should start now anyway. Okay, success. Oil pressure, you're probably wondering, is over 100 now. So obviously with it being cold, it'll come back off down around to 65 or 70 as soon as it warms up and it hits where it needs to be. So you can still hear it, it's a little bit hesitant to pick up, and that's because the needles are still a little bit too lean. So if we get a richer set of needles for it and get the distributor dialed in, it'll be ready to go to the rolling road, and we'll be able to get this out for a test day. Interestingly, we changed the cam in this from what would have been a milder cam, probably in around the 280 duration, to one now that's at more near 300. I think it's 308 or somewhere around there. And the motor feels much more lively and it feels much more crisp. So very definitely this engine wanted more cam, We originally, when we built it, it was our very first works prototype motor, and we decided that we would go a little bit tamer. We hadn't built one of these 1293s before, these FIA type motors with these H4 carbs, etc. And while it performed incredibly well and made really good power, we always felt the motor lacked the power that we built it for. And it was myself and the customer's opinion that it was under-cammed. I can tell you now, having put that cam in it and heard it start now, with a very small adjustment to the carburation and the ignition timing, this is going to produce quite a significant amount more power than it did. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Anybody who is new to the channel, you are most welcome. Take a look around. There's a series on repairing this motor, finding the problem with it, solving the problem, and putting the motor back in today, as you've seen. Have a look around at some of our other videos, and if you enjoy them, maybe you'll give us a subscribe. It really is appreciated. To everyone else watching, thank you very much for liking. Don't forget to comment in the comment section below, and let me know what you think about those engine lifting hooks. What you think. Will we go and put a pre-order in and get tooled up and make a few of those? Don't forget to like. It really does help the channel and helps spread the word around for more people to see what we do. After that, there's nothing more for me to say, but see you guys on the next one.